King Carol's embarrassing abdication following the loss of a third of Romania's territory left the throne to his son, Michael, a 19-year-old with a penchant for fast cars and airplanes. On 6 September 1940, the teenager ascended the throne.
Your Majesty, would you give us the connection between your family and that of the royal family in England?
My grandmother. She was the granddaughter of one of the granddaughters of Queen Victoria.
In a bizarre twist, Michael had been king once before when he was 6. His father had renounced the throne and fled the country with his mistress, Elena Lupescu. His parents' bitter divorce resulted in the 8-year exile of Michael's mother, Queen Helen.
As far as running the state and the political system and all that, I was never taught anything.
But officially the head of state.
Yes, that yes.
And so it's a dictatorship under Antonescu. Would he have to come to you to get your signature or your approval for any of the measures that he took?
No, not at all. Antonescu considered me as a child. There's nothing to play with.
Young King Michael comes to the throne.
Yes.
What power does he really have?
Very little. Antonescu exercises real power. He was certain also that he could control this young teenager.
He called himself, the Romanian word is conducător, which means the leader. In other words, like Hitler's Führer.
One of the first things Antonescu did was to bring back Michael's mother, Queen Helen, for whom he had great respect.
Just before Hitler invades Russia, Antonescu goes to meet with Hitler. Did Antonescu know about Barbarossa, Hitler's plan to invade the Soviet Union?
It's very possible he did, but he never told me.
Does he make a commitment in that trip for Romanian troops to fight for Hitler?
Absolutely. And there was also an agreement that the Germans could send in military advisors to train the Romanian army. And of course, thousands and thousands and thousands of German troops began to enter Romania.
Hitler also appointed 54-year-old Baron Manfred von Killinger as German ambassador to Romania.
He was more Nazi than Hitler himself. Awful character.
The alliance between Hitler and Antonescu was a match made in hell.
Hitler's interest in Romania can be summed up with one word: oil.
Ernest Volkmann is the author of numerous books and has written about espionage in Eastern Europe during World War II.
And without that oil, German tanks weren't going to move and German planes weren't going to fly. So Hitler, at all costs, wanted to keep Romania.
Almost all Romanian political leaders were conscious of the fact that if they were going to survive, they had to have the support of at least one great power. That power could not be Russia, because Russia had become for Romanians the bogeyman, the number one enemy.
Hitler offered them a precious deal. He said, look, you come with me, you get all this territory back. And it won't cost you anything.
June 1941, Hitler unleashed 3 million Wehrmacht troops into Russia. Alongside the Germans, 500,000 Romanian infantrymen supported by 1,000 aircraft and 3 cavalry brigades.
My mother found it out on the BBC. She said, you know, Romania declared war on the Russians. So, by the time I got ready for that, I called up Mihai Antonescu. I said, what's going on here? Is it true? And he said, yes.
At the time, the young king supported the invasion. He saw it as the only way to recover the 20,000 square miles of territory lost to Stalin.
All our population, myself included, considered that Bessarabia was absolutely Romanian. It was perceived by us, at least, as a national thing, as a patriotic act to get back our province.
What he didn't know was that Antonescu's war against Stalin would spell Romania's doom. In Washington, an apprehensive President Roosevelt followed the escalating war in Europe. Then suddenly, America was at war. Meet the crew of B-24 Liberator Destiny Dead, next on War Stories. By August 1941, Romanian territory lost to Stalin had been recovered. 20-year-old King Michael visited his troops and believed they'd be coming home soon. But behind the king's back, Antonescu promised Hitler he'd stand by him throughout the war.
And then the decision is made to send Romanian troops all the way into Russia.
That was Antonescu, purely him. So there I did put my foot down. I said, not so. We have no business being in your place anyhow.
Antonescu ignored the king and sent more soldiers into the maw, all the way to Stalingrad. Over the next 3 years, some 70,000 young Romanians would die and 500,000 would be wounded or captured. The young monarch sent a veiled plea for help to Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill.
Is a New Year's Day address that you give in 1943. It kind of starts the movement against Antonescu.
Yes, I don't remember the text exactly, but it has something to do about hoping to do peace. Antonescu was very angry, and the Germans were furious.
Determined to topple Antonescu, Michael and other resistance leaders, including the illustrious Dr. Ilie Maniu, joined forces in the fledgling Romanian underground.
We used to be brought to night to see me and so on, and some of my people went to see them on the sly.
Though King Michael needed the help, the cold reality was that FDR and Churchill had already decided Romania would fall into the Soviet sphere of influence.
We thought respect Russian interests, support the Russian war effort. After all, they were grinding the German army. So Washington observed, but Washington didn't engage.
Named for his father, Frank Wisner was all of 5 years old when his namesake headed the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS Bureau, in Istanbul, Turkey.
And it was from there that he was in touch with resistance or opposition elements behind German lines in southeastern Europe.
Today, this building is a luxury hotel, but during World War II, it was headquarters for Hitler's diplomats and officers in Romania. A wartime nest of intrigue and espionage, it was once described as a meeting place of continental spies, political conspirators, and adventurers.
It was like, spot the spook. That was the game. You had all the waiters, the chambermaids, the bartenders who were making huge amounts of money for keeping tabs on all these spies. In 1944, the OSS had no representation in Eastern Europe to speak of. They had a major station in Istanbul that was responsible for the Balkans.
Father dressed in Romanian army boots.
Young Wisner would follow in his father's footsteps and spend 37 years in public service. He served as ambassador 4 times and as an undersecretary in the Departments of State and Defense.
Nice one of him there. Good smile.
He's inspired by his father's work in Eastern Europe during World War II.
He was particularly in close touch with Romania, where there was an opposition movement to Marshal Antonescu, particularly Dr. Maniu's party. I remember my father telling me stories of the effect that they began receiving signals from real Romanian opposition figures, and that these were precisely the sorts of openings that they'd want to exploit.
These Ploiești refineries are just 40 miles north of Bucharest. During World War II, they supplied almost half of Hitler's black gold. By early 1943, the skies above Romania were full of American bombers trying to cut this vital flow of fuel to the Third Reich.
That was where the Luftwaffe got all of their aviation gasoline. And that's why they had to knock it out to ensure supremacy of the air.
I didn't know anything about Romania. Our target was the marshalling yards, railroad yards near Ploiești.
It was nose turret gunner Bill Feely's 34th mission and the 35th for his radio operator Paul Swearingen. On 24 April 1944, both 20-year-olds were flying in Destiny Dead, a B-24 Liberator.
As we dropped our bombs, I suddenly felt the aircraft shake.
The shell came right through the center of the airplane, left a 3-foot hole.
And all of a sudden, a little door between the bomb bay and the aft part of the aircraft opened up, and a flood of gasoline came through.
The shell knocked the glass off of the turret and knocked me out.
And I knew we were in trouble. We pulled out of formation, lost altitude, and finally the situation became untenable, and the pilot said, "Okay, guys, time to go."
He said, "Good luck and God bless you guys."
All 10 crew members survived as prisoners of war.